Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for being here for Deborah Kobylt Live. We have a very special guest on the line with us today, David Sheff, who wrote the book Beautiful Boy. I'm sure many of you have seen the movie, but David and his son, Nick, they're going to be part of the Speaker Alliance called the Speaker Alliance of Los Angeles next week, which I will be moderating. And I'm honored, David, to have you on the phone today to talk a little bit about addiction, about your book, about your son, about your journey. So thanks for joining us.
Oh, Deborah, thank you. It's great to talk to you, and thanks for moderating the conversations next week as well.
Yeah, it's really an honor. A little bit about you. You are a journalist, a freelance journalist. You write for the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, written for Rolling Stone, Playboy. You've appeared on NPR, All Things Considered. You're a successful man. When Nick, your son, first was beginning to get addicted to drugs, how old was he?
Well, he started using drugs when he was very, very young. I caught him, with marijuana in his backpack when he was only 11 years old. But, his drug use escalated over the course of his high school years to the point that he tried methamphetamine when he was about 17 years old. And as he says, that was that. He went from, what I guess we'd consider dangerous drug use, but not sort of at the level of the kind of addictive behavior that took over to, once he tried meth, it was all over. And from there, he went on, he used methamphetamine, he used heroin, he used pills, he used crack. I mean, everything. It was horrific.
When he was 11 years old and he started using pot, did that concern you? Because I told you my own personal view, and everyone's all over the map with this, that it's a bit of a gateway drug. And once you start feeling good with that, you need a little more and a little more. What were your thoughts? I mean, first of all, 11's young for anything, but when he was smoking pot, what did you do?
But, I did what I thought was the responsible thing to do as a father, which is that I marched him down to his school, talked to the teacher and the school counselor, and then, we sat huddled together, and they told me, what I wanted to hear, which is they said, oh, listen, marijuana is out there. Kids are experimenting. It's a rite of passage. All the kids are using it, but don't worry about Nick. He's great. He's a smart kid. He's a good student. He's a leader. What they should have said to me is, a responsible teacher or counselor should have said to me, let's sit down and figure out what's going on with a child who's only 11 years old, who's already starting to try drugs. Because it turned out, of course, to be a sign that, we were in trouble, that Nick was. It is known now, the research shows that the younger a person is when they use anything, the more likely they are to have drug problems and become addicted. And so somebody who starts using at 11 years old is really at a high risk. And so, this assumption that we have in our culture that, marijuana is harmless, it's going to be legal, and it is legal in California, and it's going to be, kids will talk to me about heroin and they'll say, yes, I can see why heroin or fentanyl or cocaine or whatever is dangerous, but, marijuana is not a big deal. It's natural. It's, you can't get addicted and all this stuff. Well, those are not the reality. Those are not the facts, and the kids need to understand the facts that, yes, marijuana may be natural, but so is hemlock.
Guess what?
Marijuana is, you can become addicted to marijuana. About 14% of the people who smoke pot will become addicted. And, I've gone to treatment programs to visit, and there might be 30 kids in a program, and the only drug they'd ever used was marijuana. And you don't go into treatment if you're just getting high once in a while. It's because you get addicted to the point that drug use impacts your health and your life.
I mean, I haven't had this experience, but I know other people who've had similar experiences, and I'm talking now about marijuana. And if you need something to relax you at 11, 15, 13, 17, I think right there's an issue. What do you think is going on in society, at school, at home, whatever, in our culture in general, where kids are trying this stuff younger and younger? Look, it's always been around. Kids were drinking. They were doing pot when I was little. But it's more pervasive.
It's more pervasive, and you hit the nail on the head when you said, the big question is what's going on. And what's underlying the drug use. We talk so much about the drugs themselves. Methamphetamine is bad, cocaine is bad. Don't use pain pills because it's going to lead you to heroin. But we don't often talk about why we live in a culture in which so many people get high. One of the reasons that we know that people use drugs is to deal with the stresses in their lives, and we are living in this incredibly stressful, in time. Kids are growing up. It was always hard for us to grow up. I mean, I'm sure it was for you, and it was for me. And I used drugs, and probably in some ways I used them for similar reasons to sort of assuage some of the pain I was feeling. And lo and behold, it turned out that when Nick finally saw a psychiatrist, much later, after a decade of devastating drug use that almost killed him many times, it turned out that he was suffering from bipolar disorder and depression. And so Nick's drug use was mostly, or at least a big part of it, was trying to treat himself for a psychiatric condition that had never been diagnosed.
Bipolar is
because drugs actually make you.
Go ahead, sorry. Bipolar is very often misused in society, right? I mean, you can go somewhere and you're pissed off and somebody will go, what, are you having a bipolar episode? That's so wrong. I mean, because the highs that he was feeling probably felt euphoric, and then he would just drop, right, to the lowest of low, in which case he would feel like he needed a drug to bring him back up. Is that sort of what happened with him?
Yeah, it's exactly right. We talk about people, in a sort of pejorative way, you're depressed, that's not what depression is.
Right.
Somebody who experiences depression cannot imagine that they will ever feel better. They feel so dark, they feel so hopeless. And if you have bipolar disorder, you're swinging. Nick would do this. He would swing from that deep, dark, devastated sense of hopelessness, of feeling like he wanted to die, to feeling the other part of the bipolar was, it was this crazy mania. So he had so much energy, so much anxiety. That's what it really was. It was anxiety, to a point that he was ready to, jump off a building, and he almost did things like that. And that's sort of what bipolar is, and what he experienced, and what he was trying to treat with drugs. Because when he was feeling so depressed, he would get high, and at first, it helped a little bit, but eventually, most drugs are depressants, and so it ended up making it worse. And so then he would come back and use even more drugs to try to feel better. And the same thing, if he was feeling that crazy anxiety, the mania, he would take drugs with the hope of calming down. And again, at first it worked. And then, he and other people who become addicted talk about chasing that feeling that they had the very first time they used. And so when Nick used for the first time, he said that he felt this huge, enormous relief, sort of like this pain that he'd lived with his whole life. He'd been in pain his whole life, and all of a sudden he felt okay. He felt, this euphoric feeling that he didn't know was possible. And then, because of the chemistry involved, that doesn't keep happening. Your brain acclimates very quickly to the drug, and you don't feel that euphoria. He didn't feel that relief, but he kept trying. And of course, by then his brain changed to the point that, he was addicted, and then it's no longer a choice.
I mean,
somebody who is addicted, their brain.
Meth in particular is so addictive that it changes the chemistry of the brain, and obviously that's what was going on there. What do you say to parents when they recognize something in their kid? What should they do? Is it the change of behavior? Like, what happened?
Don't do what I did, which was to go and listen to the teachers, and the teachers say, "Oh, he's great because he's getting good grades," and then say, "Oh, thank God, okay, I don't have to worry anymore." No, it's that if you recognize that there's something going on, that there's a problem, you go figure it out. And we're not equipped as parents to be doctors. We're not therapists, so we need to rely on them. And so what I should have done, and what I wish I had done, was to trust my instincts instead of this sort of very superficial and irresponsible, reassurance. And instead, I should have gone out, found a psychiatrist, taken Nick to see somebody, had him tested, because if they would have determined that he had those psychological problems when he was that young, and if they had treated them, who knows what would have happened? I mean, would he never have used drugs? Would he never have become addicted? I mean, we can't know for sure.
No.
But I don't think so. And I don't think and he doesn't think so. So that's what I guess I would tell parents is that, we often feel like we have to do it all, but nobody teaches us how to do it all. And we're not trained. The one thing we can do is we know our kids. And so we can know this when they're struggling and when they're suffering.
But
so if we do have a child who,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, if we do have a child who seems really sad, it's like maybe they are just sad, and it's okay to be sad, and kids get sad, and it's a good thing. I mean, they need to experience that. But at a certain point, if a child seems isolated and we worry, then that's the time to go find out. We take them in to get assessed, and it's hard. It's hard to be a parent. We don't know, and we try our best. But the one thing I guess I would say, and actually it was a pediatrician who said it to me, if you think there's a problem, there's probably a problem. There probably is a problem.
What was the
and
lowest?
Find out, and go find out.
What was the lowest point ever? Because I know that he had run away. He was stealing money from you and his two younger siblings. He was living on the street at what point, correct?
Yeah, he was. You asked what was the lowest point.
That's all pretty low, but
I mean, everyone that you said there,
yeah, I was going to say,
you said that there listed was horrific and terrifying. And the reality was, any of those, he could have died about 100 times or more over the period of 10 years. And the fact that he didn't is a miracle. I mean, we're just lucky. And of course, I'm reminded of that every day when I meet parents of kids who didn't make it.
It's incredible.
I hear from them.
What's incredible to me is how you've had to turn your back on him when he needed money, wanted money, Dad, come get me. And you just would say, I cannot. Because you said, and then you would say, go seek help from the counselor. That must have been the hardest thing for you to ever do, because you know darn well that it might not have ended up all that well. That's a lot of guilt to be carrying around as a parent.
Yeah, when I see the movie, that scene, there's some horrific scenes of the child, Nick, my son, using drugs and in terrible situations. But when I see the dad, which was me, hang up on his son, it's the one that brings me to tears every single time.
Yeah.
And it's because it's a reflection of what happened. And the reason that it is so hard for me to watch is because it's what you just said. I mean, he easily could have gone out that night and he could have overdosed and died, which is why when I look back, I realized that it was a mistake. It worked for us because Nick luckily called the next day and he ended up going into treatment. But these same families I hear from, these parents I meet when I go out speaking or who write me online and private messages on Twitter and all that, over and over again. They told me to practice tough love. They told me to kick him out. They told me to hang up the phone. I did it. He went out, she went out, overdosed and died. As the dad said to me, was my love tough enough? I mean, it is heartbreaking. It is a reality check that, the message that I was given by people who supposedly know how to deal with people who are addicted, it's incredibly dangerous. It's misguided. Research has shown that we don't want to close the door on someone. We don't want to practice that kind of tough love. We don't want to wait till a person hits bottom, because that just means their disease is getting worse and worse and worse, and they may die.
I don't know how you went through this. I really don't. And came out alive yourself and the rest of your family. What did this do to the rest of the family? The two younger siblings, or you? I mean, your wife, your first wife, Nick's mom. Did it tear you apart, or did you try as hard as you could to work together?
Oh, it tore us apart. The little kids Daisy and Jasper were very, very young during the beginning of it, but they grew up for 10 years, throughout their, I guess Nick started using when, I'm guessing now I'm going back in time, but Daisy might have been, 5 and Jasper 7. And so 10 years, through their early teenage years or mid-teenage years, their family, not only were they incredibly worried about their big brother, who they loved, but their mom and dad were falling apart. And, parents divorce, families explode. And the only reason that we made it, I think, is First of all, we're lucky again. Luck is a huge piece of it. Another piece of it is that we got help. We ended up going to family therapy, which was huge at a time when we may not have made it. We brought Daisy and Jasper to therapy, and Karen and I and Daisy and Jasper went to therapy. So it was useful because we were able to talk, get more on the same page, understand what we were going through, and understand what each other was going through. And then the other reason I think that everything turned out, okay for us, that we were lucky, is because as Nick evolved and as he got sober and got more mature, basically, he made a really valiant effort to bring the family together as well. And he felt so guilty, which was unfortunate because it wasn't his fault. I mean, he had this illness, but he did feel guilty, and he talks about that. And so he very, very conscientiously and tentatively at first, we've talked about it all, and he's come back and he's talked about it with Daisy and Jasper, and it's just taken a family effort, and it took a long time. There's a lot of damage, and I hear from parents who tell me that they can't imagine ever speaking to their child again, or parents or kids who tell me about their parents and brothers and sisters and husbands and wives and partners, and it's ghastly, and it's easy to have a family destroyed. On the other hand, I can tell you from our experience that if you make it through, you come out the other side a new people and with new relationships because, we just cherish each other. We don't take each other for granted
You
ever.
can't. You can't. You were looking at death right in the face. Oh my gosh. What did you think of when you first saw the film? Did you have a big hand in the film, A Beautiful Boy, which starred Steve Carell? It's a wonderful, very touching film. And I know you said that it was a little different than, of course, life, but that's how films generally are.
Yeah.
Did you have a big hand in that?
No. I mean, what we decided to do is when we found the people that we trusted to make the movie, which was, we were approached by a guy named Jeremy Kleiner, who runs Brad Pitt's production company, Plan B. And, he went on to make with his partner, Dee Dee, went for Dee Dee Gardner is her name. They went forward and they made 12 Years a Slave. They made Moonlight. They made The Big Short. I mean, they made amazing movies, and they promised us that they wanted to make a movie that told the truth, that did not give a candy-coated version of addiction, that really showed how hard it was and how debilitating it was. So then we had to, once we made that decision that we were going to trust them, we stood back and we were involved in that. They interviewed us a lot. The actors did. I met with Steve Carell, Nick met the kid who played him, Timothy Chalamet, who's like crazy good actor.
Phenomenal actor. Wow.
Karen met Maura Tierney, the woman who played her, and Nick's mom met and talked to Amy Ryan, who played her. I mean, so we were really, really fortunate to have these amazing actors who took it so seriously.
You have to.
So they asked us questions. The production designer came to our house, looked around, trying to get a sense of who we were and how we lived. And the director spent a lot of time with us, and writers interviewing us. But really, it was their movie. We had control of our books, and we committed to giving them the license to make the movie, which was really scary. But, it also allowed us to sort of sit back and not feel the same kind of responsibility, because again, with our books, it was different. I was responsible for every single word, and had to, I went over it over and over and over again. And here, so like you said, there are scenes in the movie that they use for creative license. Like there's a scene when, the dad, Steve Carell, gets up in the middle of the night and is trying to, in the movie, the excuse is that, or the logic is that, he's trying so hard to understand what's going on with his son, that he goes out and scores methamphetamine and gets high and has this like ridiculous, crazy night. And to me, that never happened, and it never would have happened, because I was not going to do anything that would have made me feel in less control, because I had rarely any control anyway.
Yeah. Wow.
So yeah, they did some stuff like that, but in terms of most of it is like scarily accurate, and the emotion is 100% accurate. I mean, they showed, I think, Steve Carell is me in terms of how devastated I was and how dark it got. And Timmy Chalamet was Nick in terms of his confusion and in terms of, it wasn't just his drug use, but the inner turmoil he was in, even when he was using drugs. He wasn't out there having fun. And so anyway,
it really captured it.
Amazing.
And should I also say, you have other books, of course, about your journey. Tweak is what your son, Nick, that's his book that he wrote about his entire journey through his drug use, his drug abuse, what was going on with him. I spoke with him yesterday. He sounded terrific. He's working now, what, was it at Netflix? Is that where he is?
Well, he writes for TV, and he's got, I think he's got both a Netflix movie, TV show going on. He's got one with Amazon. He's got one with an independent production company. He's also working in the writer's room on a new show.
Yeah, he's doing great.
That is a Netflix show. So he's doing amazingly. And even more important, he's just an amazing person. I mean, as you said, you talked to him. He's just great. He's so smart. He is super committed to trying to help kids, young kids. He goes to schools and talks to kids. And he's also written 2 memoirs. He wrote Tweak, which is a brutal, brutal book for anybody to read. It was for me, but it also has, from what I've heard from kids, it's really helped some kids
see themselves
and ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
And he also wrote a book that was sort of the next stage. That was when he became, when he went into recovery, which was the book is called "We All Fall Down."
And the two of you wrote the book.
So he's doing great. And then and then I was just going to say, and then Nick and I wrote a book together called High.
Mm-hmm.
And it has, it's for a different audience. It's for middle schoolers. It's for kids who are trying to navigate a world in which they are going to have to make decisions about drugs. I mean, it's a really complicated time, as we talked about. And our hope is that kids will read the book and talk about what they're going through. And it's not just about drugs. It's about, whether they're feeling stressed out, whether they're experiencing bullying, whether they're overwhelmed, whether they're dealing with problems at home, because they all relate to drug use.
I always try and tell kids, I don't think they listen, but go outside. I don't know if that makes them feel any better, but go outside, look at a tree, look at the sky, look at the ocean, look at the sand, look at something. I don't know if it works when you're in the middle of feeling horrible and you're 15, because one puff of a marijuana cigarette can truly lead you down the wrong path. I'm not in favor of legalizing it. I'm not necessarily in favor of any of it at all, because I've personally seen that it can be a bit of a gateway into something else. So there's my parting words to that. But I very much look forward to interviewing you and Nick at the School Speaker Alliance of Los Angeles. You're going to have you're a terrific audience, actually. A lot of engaged people that are going to want to hear your story. And I thank you so much for coming on.
We're looking forward to it, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we're really looking forward to it. Schools are in our view, it's kind of the most important place to talk, because we're talking hopefully to some kids and to their parents and teachers. And, it's just about, we all have to have these conversations if we're going to help our kids grow up, safely and healthily. So, well, thank you, and really looking forward to meeting you next week.
Yeah, me too, David. Have a safe flight down here, and very much look forward to talking to you next week. And thank you for coming on our podcast today, Deborah Kobylt Live. And you can watch our podcast on Facebook and on YouTube, and listen on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and just pretty much anywhere else that you get your podcasts. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in today for a special edition of Deborah Kobylt Live with David Sheff and his book, A Beautiful Boy, Tweak, by his son, Nick, High, which they wrote together, and a variety of others. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.